Okay.
Welcome to iOS Application Development Program. In the previous session, we have done design an iOS application project in Xcode from Adobe XD Designs, and we have started the project in Xcode. So I'm taking you to iOS Wallet Xcode app. Now we are going to begin the project here. So we are going to understand the properties and all the important aspects of building an iOS application. Okay. So initially, I'm going to walk you through with the iOS Swift project code structure, and then we will get into understanding how we design the codes and how we make different user interfaces, connect them with backend APIs, connect with databases, and perform services. And the objective would be to build up an iOS wallet app. So that is what we will be doing. So here I'm taking you to a few resources. Let me just quickly take you to certain resources which we will be using in today's session. So first we are going to understand the project structure. Then we will understand the important files, and we are going to start writing the code. So iOS Swift project structure. We'll see the latest references, what are available, and then we are going to make use of them. So there are a lot of different documentations available from Apple website. So we are going to get started with the group structure, the code structure, and the other important way of how to manage the Swift project structure. Okay. So I'm going to take you to creation of a standalone Swift package with Xcode. And let me just quickly show you some of the important. We also have a project Navigator overview, which we can make use of. So you can see that there are a lot of great websites and resources which are available, and we will be using a lot of those. There is also an important one, Swift Style Guide, which we will be using. You also need to understand the Xcode build system. Okay, so we have got the documentation here from Apple. This is what we are going to refer. Then there's a documentation for the project Navigator in Xcode. This is from dummies.com. This is also we are going to make use of so that we'll understand the complete utility of the project Navigator. What are the files, what are the storyboards and everything, so that you will have a complete idea. And then we are going to get started with writing the style, writing the UI styles and all the other important stuff, which will be very, very important for you to understand. How do we write code? What are the basics of the files? How do we name them? What is the naming convention? This is what we're going to use. And finally, how the Xcode applications are built. Okay. So how it is compiled, how it is assembled, how it is linked, how it is loaded, so that it will help you well in debugging the applications properly. Okay, so these are the 4 resources which we will be using. So let me quickly share that with you on your Trello board. So references for lesson 7. 1, we're going to get the overview of project Navigator in Xcode. Second, we are going to Apple documentation. Then we are going to understand the Swift style guide. And finally, you do need to understand the Xcode build system. Okay, Pratik, these will be the 4 very, very important fundamental resources which is required for you to have a better understanding of how iOS Swift applications are built. Okay, so I will be opening the documentation as well as the Xcode in parallel, so that we will have a complete idea about what are we referring to and what we will be explaining. So I'll take you to the first resource, which is this one, overview. Okay, so we are going to understand the overview of the project Navigator right from here. So whenever you have to work with any of the application in a project in Xcode for development of an iOS application, okay, we have to understand a lot of things while building the application properly. So one of the most important area is the Navigator area. Okay, this is an optional area of the workspace, but it helps us in management of the project in much easy way. Okay, so what you can see is at the very top we have the options to hide and open the Navigator area. Okay, at the very top in the views you have these options. Okay, you can go to the view and you can go to the navigators, and these are the following navigators which are available: the project navigator, source code navigator, symbols navigator. Then you have other windows like find, issues, test, debug, breakpoints, and the reports. Okay, so navigator area is a very important area, and first one is the project navigator area, which is very useful for us. Now, taking you to this, what do we need to do? The navigator area includes the navigator selector bar, the content area, and the filter bar. Okay, these are the 3 things. So what do we have is, we do have the content area. This is the project navigator. This is the source control navigator. This is the symbol navigator. This is the find navigator. This is issues navigator, test navigator, debug navigator, breakpoint navigator, and finally the report navigator. So all these navigators are available here. This you can also access from the views also, which I have shown here. Is that clear?
Yes.
Now, when we get to the project navigators enable you to do things like add, delete, group, and otherwise manage your files in the project. And you can choose a file to view or edit in the editor area. So once you select a file, you're going to get the editor area. This central section is the editor area. Okay. Now, depending on whatever file we are choosing, we are going to get an appropriate editor for it, and we are going to edit our application accordingly. So in the left-hand side, the reference, you can see that, for example, all the disclosure triangles are open so that the project navigator displays all the files in the project. So it means that this is the navigator triangle. Once you click on these, you will be able to find out each and every file. You can click on those files and you can edit it. Okay. Now, so what am I going to do? We are going to get started with understanding the project structure. Secondly, what do we have is we do have a filter bar. Okay. Filter bar is at the bottom of the Xcode. Here you have a filter bar. Okay. With filter bar, what you can do is you can restrict the content that is displayed, such as you can get to see only the recently edited files, the unsaved files, or the file names. You can select the filters accordingly from here. Okay. You can type the kind of filter you would be needing. You can set the timer, you can set and restrict the files, and you can do all that stuff. Okay. Now, making your way down the folder structure shown in the project Navigator, the first folder listed is labeled road trip, which is the name of the project, but in our case, it is iOS wallet Xcode. So this is the name of the project in the first area. This folder contains all the source elements for the project, including source code, resource files, graphics, and other important files required for successful working of our application. Is that clear? So
Yes.
we have categorized it into products and iOS wallet Xcode binaries. Okay, so product will be the final application which will be developed, and the iOS wallet Xcode contains all the project source codes, libraries, and all the important files required to build the application. Now, taking you to the next section, each template organizes source elements in different ways. So there is a master detail application template, the interface header, and the implementation code files, along with the storyboard and the supporting files folder inside this project. Okay. So what are we going to do? We are going to make use of all of these files and projects, and we'll see how to get started with these. Okay. Now, so I'm going to open the products. The product will contain the final application. This is the app, which you already understand what an app is. So this app will be later converted into an IPA file after signing and will be uploaded onto the Play Store. And on the very right hand side, you can find out the full path where this binary app code will be generated. I believe this is clear.
Yes.
So for now, we don't have anything as of now here within the product app, because we have to build the source codes properly, compile them, and then export it to the product, to the development. Now, secondly, what do we have is we have all the source codes where we have three categories in it: the classes, resources, and the supporting files. Okay. When I open the classes, we have few files here. And the very first important file is the app delegate.swift. Can you see that? The
Yes.
first file. This file will be available in each and every project. Okay. And what does it has? The app delegate file contains the code for app specific behavior that customizes the behavior of a frame object so that you don't have to subclass it. So a behavior-rich framework object delegates the task of implementing one of its responsibilities to an application delegate for a very specific behavior. And what is the behavior currently for this app delegate.swift? It is going to perform the following part. So what is an app delegate? App delegate is, you can consider this as the very first code which will be executed as soon as the application is launched. Okay. Now, what will happen? As soon as this app delegate is going to execute, what all functions will be called? It has following functions like, did the application finish launching? Will the application resign active? Did the application entered in the background? Did the application entered in the foreground? Foreground means it is visible on the screen. Background means it is not visible in the screen, but it is available in the background. People can click on that all apps, the menu button, so that they can view all the open apps on the phone. Followed by application did become active and application will terminate. So these are some of the standard functionalities of an application, which is by default available in every application. Okay. So it handles opening of the application, and closing of the application. Is that clear? So if I quickly
Yes.
take you to the mobile app here, just allow me a minute. So I'll quickly go to quick time. File, new screen recording. Go to new movie recording. Okay, here. Okay, so now here. So suppose this is my mobile phone currently running here, and you can see that we have got a few important files here. The few important codes here. So what will happen? Suppose I've got some n number of applications available over here. Okay. Suppose I'm going to start an application known as Practo one, which I am just testing here. So now what will happen as soon as we are going to click on this application Practo, once I click on it, so there, once the application finished launching, this will be retried, this will be identified. Okay, the first function. And this will also load that the application is about to move from active to inactive state. Okay. Then you have a method did entered background. So we can use this method to release shared resources, save user data, invalidate timers, and store enough application state information to restore your application. And this means if I just do my application like this, so now currently it is not active on screen, but it is on the background. So if I quickly go to this part, as in I will check all the applications open in the backend, so I can click on them and it can resume back. Okay. This is known as the application will enter foreground, which means we have called the application as part of the transition from the background to the active state. So here you can undo many of the changes we made on entering the background, followed by the application did become active, which means now the application is active. So we can restart any tasks that were paused while the application was inactive. If the application was previously in the background, optionally refresh the user interface. Okay. And finally, once I click on it, and if I terminate my application, so this application is going to be called. Okay. Termination of the application. So what am I going to do? I'll show you a few things like the toast facility kind of stuff, so that you will get to have an idea that when each of these app delegate files are being called. Okay, I'll show you, I'll walk you through the code. So have you understood why do we have the app delegate files? The app delegate files have some important functionalities which we can control the application, with which we can control the application. Okay. Other than this, the next, what do we have is, we do have the storyboard. Okay. The storyboard files live in your project as the main storyboard file. Okay. So if you have created an application for iPad file, you will definitely get for iPad also. If you just made it for iPhone, you're going to get it only for the iPhone. Okay. Currently, we have just made it only for the iPhone. So in the resources section, you're going to get it in the interface. And this is the main storyboard. Okay. So since we have exported only one, I think two views. So both of the views are available in the main storyboard. Okay. So I've clicked on it just to show you how it looks like, how the storyboard might look like. So these are the storyboards which we created earlier. I think you remember.
Yes.
Okay. Coming to the next part, with a storyboard, you can create and implement an overall view of the flow of your application and the user interface elements. Okay, got it? So what we can
Yes.
do, we can do this part here. So I'm going to separate all the three a little. So currently, this is my flow of the application. So initially, I'm going to get a navigation controller, followed by I'll switch to this page, the second page, and which is the landing view controller. And third, I will get to the transaction view controller. So here on the left-hand side, you can see that we have these three controllers. One is the navigator controller scene, one is the transactions controller scene, another one is the landing view controller scene. Okay, is that clear within the story?
Yes.
Now, so once we are done watching this, then what we have is we have the view controllers. Okay, where the view controllers? View controllers are available here in the classes under the file controllers. So what do we have is, you can see that we've got three controllers here. One was the navigation, one was the transactions, and one was the landing. So the one which we are currently controlling here is the landing view controller and the transactions view controller. So initially, if I get to the landing view controller, this is my source code for my landing view controller scene. Okay, can you see that? So let me just mark it. So my landing view controller Swift file will be controlling the source code of this view, the landing view controller scene. And similarly, I've got another file, which is the transaction view controller and user transaction section, which I will not currently, which I'll come out. I just want to show you initially that this transactions view controller is going to be controlling the transaction view controller scene. So what do we have is, we do have a resource where we have an interface, where we have the storyboard, and within that storyboard, we have scenes. And then what do we have is, in the main application, under the classes, under landing view controller and transaction view controller, we have our view controllers. Okay, these are the Swift codes which we try to capture. I believe this is clear to you.
Yes.
Now, what next we do have is, after these controllers, we have some very important files known as the supporting files. And we typically find these as the pre-compiled headers. Okay. So one of the important files are the property list files, the plist files. Okay. So now I'm going to the supporting files, and here we do have the info.plist file. So the plist file, which you have always been asking, here we have the plist file available, the property list for our application. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
So what is the info plist? Info plist will help you organizing a lot of options for your application. Similarly, we have an information property list here. In the information property list, you can control a lot of things like localization of the native development of your application. Do you want to localize it for which language? We can configure all of those. Okay, I believe this is clear.
Yes.
Now, what next we do have? We have the frameworks, we have the products. So frameworks would be available when we will be using frameworks in our application. So currently we are not using the frameworks, but as you have seen, there were applications like Adobe, they were using different frameworks. Okay. So what the frameworks will hold? The frameworks will hold the code libraries that act a lot like prefab building blocks for your app, which means some pre-written code or existing code we can make use of in order to write our applications faster. Okay, so we will be using a lot of frameworks, and then we are going to understand that how we can make use of them. Finally, you will have the product folder. This is the folder where you are going to get your application file, and here is the products folder, which we have already discussed. Okay, and here you are going to get your production app. So your production app you will be able to access from your, from the folder, and then you can sign it and update it on Git. On your App Store. So this is the overall project structure. So I believe you're clear with the project structure now.
Yes.
Then we have the standard documentation for iOS. Okay. So what we can do is we have documentation for design, documentation for development, documentation for distribution, documentation for discovering different features. So currently I'll get to the develop part. Okay. So in developments, what are we going to do? We're going to get started with Xcode development. Okay. There are a lot of resources available with respect to the Xcode setup, how we are going to make use of, what are the custom documentation, how you can get started with development for, for Xcode. 13 is the latest version, I believe, which is available. So we can design for desktop, we can design for mobile, we can design for iPad, we can design for various other devices supporting iOS. Okay. Now, currently, we have to get started with the development part. So I'll get to the Swift code. Once I click on Swift. So Swift is a powerful programming language that is very easy to learn, and we will be able to design applications for iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, and watchOS. Okay. I have in fact built a lot of applications for iOS and watchOS. So I will be showing you those applications also. Now, so as you can see that how can we ensure that we are writing our codes in Swift? So the controllers, the controller scenes which we are using, we are controlling those scenes using the Swift codes here. So the Swift file will have a Swift extension, and we are going to write codes in it. Okay. I believe this is clear.
Yes.
Now, so Swift is a modern programming language which we will be using, and you will understand how we are going to design a lot of great content with respect to the Swift documentation. Okay. So then we will get into the development of the Swift code, and you're going to understand how we are going to make use of it. Okay. So I'll walk you through with each and every code, whatever would be required when we get started with designing it. Okay. So before that, you need to understand all these file structures, the variables, the functions, the overloaded declarations, the general formatting of your code, the one statement per line code, how the line wrapping works, and each and everything. These are the very, very important way of writing the code. Okay. So first, we do need to go through with all of these so that we understand how the control flow statement works, how the expression works. I believe this is clear. And we are going to test those on Swift Playground as well as in the application itself. Okay. So we have the Swift statements, we have the enum classes. So this is the complete fundamental which is required before getting into designing the industrial applications for iOS. Okay. I believe this is clear.
Yes.
We will be following this resource initially, which is the Swift style guide, and we are going to make use of the style guide in order to understand the fundamentals and get started with the applications. Okay. Now, before we get into it, I would like to give you a quick walkthrough, okay, of how the application will be built. Okay. Now, so when it comes to building an applications for Xcode, how the Xcode build system works. In the Xcode, there are 5 processes which is going to happen. When you write a source code in Swift, you will pass it through a preprocessor. The preprocessor is going to pass it to the compiler. Then the compiler is going to convert your application high-level code into a machine understandable code. That machine understandable code will be understood by an assembler, and it will convert it into a machine code. Okay. Post that, your linker is going to link the library files which are required to to execute certain functionalities, and finally your program will be loaded into memory by a loader. Is that clear? These are the 5 important components when building and running the application on a device. I believe this is clear.
Yes.
Now, so what do we need to do? We do need to understand that when we will be hacking the application, we have to capture an application from the memory. Then we have to link all those files which are required, and then we are going to disassemble it in a disassembler in order to see what is the functionality of the code. Okay. So you won't be able to reach out to the Swift code to modify it directly. You can only reach out to this level by disassembling. Okay. So here is what the hacker does. He goes back from the background to this section where the Swift code has been written. Is that clear?
Yes.
So initially this process is easy, but this process is very hard, the vice versa. So but you do need to understand this process so that you can understand what is happening when you attack an iOS application like a hacker. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Got it? So what is pre-processing? So the purpose of pre-processing step is to transform your program in a way that it can be fed to a compiler. So it replaces your macros with their definitions, it discovers dependencies, resolve the preprocessor directives. So Swift compiler does not have a preprocessor. So we are not allowed to define macros in our Swift projects. So what do we need to do? Xcode build system partially compensates it and does pre-processing using an active compilation condition that is configured in the build settings. So we will be working out on it. We will understand. Before that, before we get into getting into the code part, what I want from you is you need to go through with this article so that you can understand the basic of all these 5 steps. Okay. So once you understand this Xcode build system, just you have to go through, just you have to read it once. Okay. It's not anything practical, just you need to go through it. So has to have an overall idea. Then in the next session, what we will do, we will get started with the Swift style guides, where we are going to implement the basics of Swift, followed by writing the high level applications by referring Apple documentation. This is what we are going to do. Is that clear?
Yes.
Cool.